either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And today we are doing a little bit of an oddball movie.
Yes.
We're actually doing our first Robin Williams movie.
Yes, we are.
Movie I didn't know existed, called...
And one of my favorite comedies of all times.
And so I've heard a lot about it.
Yes.
The Birdcage.
The Birdcage.
I had never heard of this. To be fair, I love Robin Williams, but I haven't seen a lot of his work, unfortunately.
Yes.
And I've been trying to do more of a dive into his work because I do like the movies I've seen him in. Mine is, Father's Day, which this is going to be our Father's Day episode, and that might have been a little appropriate as well. Actually, he does a lot of fatherly roles.
He does do a lot of fatherly roles, but he's a surprisingly versatile comedic actor.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think, for me anyway, Robin Williams' humor hit peak for me in The Birdcage, because The Birdcage, story-wise, is all based off of a French-Italian film, The Birdcage.
Mm-hmm.
I will not pretend like I can say that in French.
La Cage aux Folles.
That. From 1987, which itself was adapted from a stage play.
Mm-hmm.
And so the underlying tone of the humor for this movie is that French-Italian style, which is a little bit more dry, a little bit more sarcastic than what we're used to. And then with Robin Williams' delightful acting and with Gene Hackman's acting, also the two of them playing off of each other, it just, for me, really was the perfect comedy. And I'm not a big comedy lover.
As well as Nathan Lane. So.
Yes.
And before we really get into it, first off, did you get around to the French one? I know you've been busy.
I did. I watched it last night.
Yes.
I loved it. But I can see how The Birdcage improved some aspects.
Yes, and Americanized it, but...
Very much so.
I don't want to make too many comparisons. I just want to focus on the American one. There are going to be some comparisons, but can't be helped.
No, and I will say, if you like The Birdcage, the original version, the French version, it's not very difficult to get a hold of. It's
part of the Criterion collection.
It has English subtitles. I don't think it's been dubbed. If it has, I wouldn't bother. The dialogue's slow enough that it's easy to read along with.
Yeah.
And while it is really fun and charming, I wouldn't say that you have to go out your way to watch it.
Yes, I agree. And before we dive in, what are we drinking today?
The better question is, what were we planning on drinking?
Planning on white wine, because that's about the only thing we really see them drink besides Turkish coffee. But I got in decent time yesterday, and because we were recording today, I hadn't done my outline, so I spent my evening doing this.
And I am still unpacking boxes. So Today we are having water.
Soon we will come to the fancy drinks again.
We will.
It's some high quality H2O.
So good.
So good. So, The Birdcage, for those who don't know, is about a gay couple who run a drag club called The Birdcage.
Mm-hmm.
And when their son tells them that he is getting married to a conservative senator's daughter, they are forced to choose between themselves or being there for their son.
Yes.
As well as dealing with each other.
Yeah, and this is This right here is where the updated and Americanized version of The Birdcage really shines.
Mm-hmm.
Because the plot for the two pretty much the same, but the character development that the actors bring to this is so good.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have two very extreme group of acting here. We have our delightful couple who are over the top. They are artsy. They are as flamboyant as they can possibly be, while still being incredibly real and humanistic, compared to the fiancé's parents, who are part of the most conservative group possible.
They are even I would say even the Amish would think they're taking a bit too far.
I think there's a quote in the movie, or it might have been one of the actors, that describing the fiancé's parents as thinking that some of the largest church leaders are too out there, too far. No, we need to bring all of it right back in. Very stiff-collared.
Yes, very much so. So, the screenplay was Elaine May.
Yes.
There were 4 other people who worked on the early screenplay, but I didn't write them down.
It's okay.
And it was directed by Mike Nichols.
Yes.
It stars, as we mentioned previously, it does star Robin Williams, Nathan Lane, Gene Hackman, and Diana West.
Yes.
One thing of interest is that Nichols actually required Lane and Williams to record the scene first, as it was written, before letting them ad-lib, because both of them are known for ad-libbing.
Very much so.
And actually, this was the breakout Hollywood role for Nathan Lane, who had been working on American Broadway. And at the time also had not come out yet.
Yeah, but also kind of ironic, because later on, I think the Birdcage got a Broadway version of itself.
I'm about to get into that a little bit, or I'll get into that a little bit later / at this point.
Yes.
Because originally in the 80s, Nichols was hired to direct an Americanized Broadway version of the Le Cage à Follet. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but French is difficult.
French is very difficult.
And I promise I would not insult them. I don't hate the French, I hate their language. But after a new production team was brought on to co-produce and some people were fired, they turned it into the 1983 Broadway musical, The Birdcage.
Yes.
The film adaptation was actually originally planned for the 80s as well, with Frank Sinatra and Dudley Moore supposedly to play the roles, but when Moore backed out, it stayed in development hell until the 90s, where we have our 1996 adaptation?
96.
96,
and
yes.
It actually ended up working out really well, because the 90s were a really hot point for the LGBTQ plus community, especially in Hollywood. There was a lot of movies, I shouldn't say a lot, there were more movies than normal being put out that had leading characters being part of the community, or just more representation in general. There was also a lot of communication and, discord between, I don't want to say who's right and who's wrong, but that's how the argument was presented, especially when we were kids, which is mostly where I'm pulling this memory from, is growing up in the 90s and having to hear that uncle or that aunt complain about this or that from their twisted views. And so the Birdcage hit at a really nice time to talk about these subjects, but it talked about it in a way that a lot of these other movies weren't.
And that might explain why I might have missed it, because in 96, I was still in, well, depends on when in 96. And if it was late, either way, I was still in Alaska, but it was right before we moved to Germany. So yeah, we were kind of limited on some of the stuff we got, because I learned my parents missed out on the whole satanic panic of the 90s.
Oh, they missed out on the fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Birdcage really stood out from its competitors, because not only was it presenting a two-parent, two gay men as a parent, a supportive parents, successful, good parents, but it also completely missed what, during the 90s, was a huge talking point in almost every movie, was the AIDS pandemic. And the Birdcage didn't address it. It showed two people loving and having their lives continue on without that being part of the narrative, which really made it stand out. And
honestly, that's a strong point of it, because they didn't make it in a time where we didn't fully understand what was going on with the pandemic. It remained pretty much timeless. We get it's in the 90s, but you could bring it even to today and
yes,
it would still work.
And another thing that I think worked really well for it, which I don't know if people necessarily caught it while it was happening, but nowadays it's very prevalent when you go back and watch this movie. The costumes of it, because they moved the setting to Miami, because it's now the 90s, this is an American film, we need to put it somewhere that makes sense for an American audience. Miami. Makes sense. The costumes for this could not be better.
No.
And honestly, because of how long this movie's been out, a lot of the fashion is now rolling back around and being hip and cool again, which is hilarious to watch because for a lot of the costume choices were made on purpose to be examples of the characters, a little bit more on the extremes, a little bit more into fashion, whether that's super conservative fashion or more out there and expressive fashion.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we've come back around and in 2021 are seeing the exact same like divide happening again in fashion is really fun and actually works really well, whereas its predecessor didn't quite hit that note quite as well.
Yeah, the original Birdcage Folie. It definitely is a product of the 70s.
Yes.
Like it feels.
It does.
And it's European, so it's got a lot of old world feel to it rather than the Americanization brought something fresh to it.
It really did.
Unfortunately, there is a lot of information on La Cage aux Folles, or full, whatever.
Yes.
But there is not a lot of background on the Birdcage.
No.
And I think part of that is just due to, I think Nichols died not terribly long after this, so like...
No, this was kind of the end of his career.
Yeah. And, Nichols actually hired PBS producer Rick McCrae to make a feature-length documentary about drag queens in Paris, London, San Francisco, and Atlanta before filming began, and used the resulting feature film as a way to train Williams and Lane about drag.
I mean, they did a great job.
Yeah.
Everyone feels spot on and have withstood the test of time.
Yeah. So, and I mean, great for me on research because I don't have to go through all the special features.
Very true.
Yeah. And so, into the Birdcage.
Yes.
We open with a beginning set of credits over an ocean view onto the boardwalk in South Beach as we fly into the Birdcage.
Yes.
One thing about this scene, it is not a continuous shot. It is 4 separate shots, which is still cool. Good editing.
Very.
But I think they missed their potential. And they have an actual title card for the Birdcage without I felt like using the sign as
the title card.
Title card would have been
that would have been really
nice.
Good. But this is the 90s and a title card was required. It was the style.
Kind of, yeah.
Especially for a comedy film, and this was meant to be a mainstream comedy film. This wasn't a targeted audience release. This was meant for the masses to enjoy.
Yeah.
And it was what people would have been looking for.
Yeah, I get it. It's just...
It would have been cool, though.
It would have been nice. And so we enter the club and we see a group of drag queens on stage singing We Are Family.
Yes.
And we learn, and I love how they set this up because we're going through things real quickly.
Yes.
I mean,
it is chaos.
This is all going to be like within the first 5 minutes of the movie. We learn that Starina is not ready, as Robin Williams' character Armin Goldman is checking on the patrons and socializing, checking on the Kennedys. So we know this is a hip club.
Yes.
Affluent club.
Yes.
Yeah. And eventually he gets his man Armand to check, but he eventually Armand asks a man named Agador to check in on Starina.
Yes.
Who Agador eventually comes down and tells him that Starina is not coming down.
And this feels like we've only been in this movie a couple of seconds, it feels like, and we've already established the chaos of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They are both in the theater department, they are in the drag queen club scene, so there is an extra layer of drama and chaos put on all of this.
They're drama queens.
They are drama queens. And on top of that, one of our leads is a prima donna.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so, Armand goes up to the room where Starina is moping because they believe that Armand is going to leave them, and
they have a constant fear of Armand cheating on them,
yeah.
Which is so sad.
And this is the first time we are introduced to both of our characters.
Yes.
And, side note of interest on this, Steve Martin was actually cast as Armand, and Williams was going to be cast as Albert, or Starina, because Williams was trying to do a little bit more out of the norm of what he was doing at the time.
Sure, okay.
But when Martin dropped out due to being overbooked schedule, Williams took over the role of Armand and Lane took over as Albert.
And honestly, it's perfect casting, isn't
I know,
it, Charlie?
right, Charlie? You little shit.
but it really is. It's really smart casting.
Mm-hmm.
Not just from a who can play what, because honestly, at this point in his career, Robin Williams proved he could play just about any character and do it well. But the way that the two of them match up works so much better in this format, and also plays a sneaky homage to the original because they both kind of look a little bit like their original cast.
Just a bit.
Just enough for you to be like, I see it.
As much as I like Steve Martin, I don't think his comedy would have been right for the role.
No.
And just the way Williams and Lane play off each other.
It's both over the top, but also there's so many subtleties to how they both have played their comedy throughout this whole movie that while this entire movie is almost a play on a theater sort of feel, like everything in their lives is over the top. It's all a theatric to an extent. They still feel like very real people. Like, I know people who are like this in real life.
Oh, yeah. And let's be honest, Williams would be too hairy to play Albert.
He would. I think Williams had the drive to do it, but the look wouldn't have been quite right.
No. And sometimes that's exactly it.
Yes.
Which, I mean, if Steve Martin had been cast, I think it would have been fine.
It would have been fine, but I don't think it would have been the classic that it's become.
Exactly. And so, through their banter, which is great.
It's so good.
I do want to say, I'm going to gloss over a lot of banter.
Because this whole movie is banter.
And honestly, us describing it would not give it any credit whatsoever.
No, especially because they go back and forth between each other so quickly that trying to describe what happens without just kind of generalizing it really wouldn't do it any justice. Yeah.
And the biggest takeaway is that, and I do want to mention this because it does actually play later on into the movie, is that Starina, because we haven't actually heard their name yet, demands a palimony. Fun fact, Florida, Texas, Virginia, and North Carolina are the only states in the South that palimony agreements are allowed. So Florida is a perfect setting for this movie.
It is.
I also do love this scene because, and I will bring up a little bit of the banter, because one of my favorite bits in the movie is that she's complaining to Armand that he'll never understand because he is a man and they are a woman. And Armand responds, well, you are a man. But you are a man.
And at this point, we also get a really nice look into how the characters who plays what role. Because Armand, while being an art-centered man, he's very much into running his club and his theater. He's much more of a manager sort of mindset, which plays throughout the rest of the movie, whereas Albert is much more of the center star.
Yeah, they're very much their heads in the clouds while Armand's
one is
grounded.
The heart and one is the head in this relationship.
Yes.
But to like a little bit of an extreme.
Yeah, and so their relationship, after looking back at it, kind of makes me think of the relationship between Gin and Hana in Tokyo Godfathers.
Yeah, it does feel similar, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very much, and even like their banter is very similar, where Gin's constantly calling Hana an old man.
Yes.
Or an old queen or something.
Old queen.
Yeah.
An old queen.
Yeah. And so, after getting nowhere with Starina, Armand threatens to send Carmen on, to which Starina is offended and agrees to do it because the people are there for for their performance, and how dare they? Carmen's a hack.
Which cracks me up so much. This is such theater banter, and it's just kind of seeped into their everyday life.
Yes. And at this point for me watching the movie, I love this kind of humor. I love the witty banter. I was afraid after watching the French film, because the French one it has similar banter, but it doesn't have the energy and it's quite dry.
Yes.
I was afraid they were going to make the American adaptation a bit more slapsticky.
It got close at times.
Yes. But it never went too far.
No. the banter, while very much drama banter and very much theater banter, it at no point feels like banter that is there for comedy's sake.
No.
Like, it very much feels like two people who have been in the theater for so long, they do this every week.
Yeah.
Like, this threat is not new. This is not a new problem that they are having. This is their life, and they have done this before, and they will continue to do this dog and pony show again next week.
Yes, exactly. And particularly the part I really like about this too is the shaving bit.
Yes, I do too.
Shaving now? Well, I can't wax.
No, it'd be all red for stage.
Yeah, and it's too late.
It's too late. But it also kind of proves that two extra sides of the characters that come in later, Armand plans ahead and is ready for the future of whatever it is, even if he's not pleased with what he has to get through to do that. Whereas Albert will wait till the last moment and hope for the best, and then make it work.
Yes, exactly. And so, Starina goes on stage, and Armand is up to some fishy shit.
Yes.
I do want to bring up real quick that this is the first time we've seen them both in full regalia.
Yes.
Starina, to me, looks like, or at least her stage costume, makes me think of a gaudy version of Whoopi Goldberg's character in Star Trek.
Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas Armand looks like an 80s porn star that's fusion hod with some like cheap mafia wannabe dude.
Yes, there's a lot of gold chains and suits with interesting color formats.
He looks quite Italian.
He looks very Italian, but still definitely Miami, Florida from the 90s, and you know what look I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
There is no doubting it.
Yeah. And so Armand sneaks off, and their maid Agador is now dressed as Lucy and Rick, which
I love their maid.
Or Lucy and Ricky, which I did have to look this up because I figured it was a reference to I Love Lucy, but I don't remember a lot of the show or the husband's name.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't expect everyone to live in the past with me.
Yeah, I know.
But I do think that it's very, like, it's a reference that while, granted, maybe not everyone immediately gets, they picked a reference that, like, was already timeless to begin with, so that way when people like you are like, well, I think it's this, and you Google it, you instantly know what you got.
Yes.
There's no question, there's no, like, hidden reference or some star who got lost through the time.
It's someone, you can assume before.
Yes. Yeah, you can make a quick judge and be like, I'm pretty sure that's I Love Lucy, but I haven't seen the show, so maybe.
Yeah. And I just had to look it up because I'm a nerd.
It's okay.
So, yeah.
It's a good show.
And, yes, I do love the maid. Played by Hank Azaria.
Does a great job.
Who, when he was developing the role of Agador, which...
Developing the role of Agador.
Well, I mean, you have to, because, like...
Agador Spartacus.
Yes, I mean, for a straight man to play, or any person to play a character, like...
And this is a really over-the-top character.
Well... That's the thing, he was worried about creating a stereotypically gay character, and he created two voices, a more masculine one, and the one used in the movies, and after consulting a gay friend, he was told to use the one used in the movies because it was more realistic.
It's very funny. He does a great job, and all of the parts of his character that are over the top aren't necessarily the, like, stereotypical gay parts.
No.
It's the fact that he refuses to wear shoes even while in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Or the fact that he runs around in just a apron.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Full butt cheeks flying in the wind. Just the apron.
It is very much the stereotypical anime house cleaning
it is the
fantasy.
It is very much the housemaid fantasy.
Yes.
And, like, I also love that on a couple of different occasions, Armand will make a remark about, like, you're a terrible maid, why did we even hire you? But then Albert will be like, ugh, such good help.
Yeah. Well, and
both of them clearly like his company and enjoy his quirks.
Well, and he's also a great balancing character because he's in between like he's a bit far out there, but he also kind of because he's the stereotypical one, he makes Albert seem
very normal.
Yeah.
Yes, and he also brings the two of them they're both of their personalities together into one character, which helps balance the comedy act a little bit better.
Yeah.
Because then it's not all on Armand and Albert to balance each other. They have this third character who's kind of a mix between both of them. He's both incredibly over the top and theatrical, but also gets a lot of stuff done.
Yeah.
Like, the house would not run without this man.
Yeah. And supposedly the voice is also somewhat based off his grandmother's voice.
Oh, adorable.
Thank you, IMDb, for this trivia. And so at this point, even Agador thinks that Armand is acting suspicious.
He is being suspicious.
Because he shoos him off, gives him the night off, and after Agador is gone, a young man appears. And
young man?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And there is some odd sexual tension between the two.
Which is all, it turns out, just played up for the camera.
Yeah, it's quickly broken as we learn the young man is Armand's son, Val. And that he is there to tell Armand that he is planning to get married.
And I love Armand's response.
Because it's even worse. Not only is he too young to get married, he's getting married to a girl.
The tragedy.
Yes.
But this is such a, parent reaction.
Mm-hmm.
We learn that his son is in college.
Yeah.
He's been in college for a little while. It's not like this is his first week of school or anything.
Yeah.
We can assume he's at around 20, 21 years old.
I think they say 23 or something. So
he's old enough to drink.
Yeah, he's at the end of his college career.
Yeah, so he's not a baby, and by most college timelines, this is about the age where if you meet someone in college, you get married right afterwards, is the general timeline. So this isn't supposed to be a surprise.
Yeah.
Parents should have seen this coming sort of scenario, and his parents are like, no, my baby is not ready. He's a full-grown man at this point.
Yeah.
A young man, but still a man, still full-grown.
I am in the opposite condition right now. I am being threatened to be put on 90 Day Fiancé at this point.
I would pay good money to watch you on 90 Day Fiancé.
I refuse.
Even if you don't meet anyone, can you just go to be, wreck that show?
Yeah. Oh, actually, that would be great, because I would ruin that.
You would ruin the show, and it'd be fantastic.
Maybe now. One nice touch that I actually really appreciate this is that Val mentions that he is the only dude in his fraternity not to come from a broken home. I like this because in a lot of those rom-coms you see, someone comes from a tragic background.
Yes, everyone's so sad.
And there's one person who didn't come from that, and they're the one who actually shows them the value of family and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's cliche, I like it in this film.
I do too.
It's a very nice touch instead of what it could have been.
Yes, and on top of that, this movie, I don't want to say goes out of its way, but it really solidifies to you the fact that, in Val's life, there is nothing wrong. His parents love him dearly.
Yeah.
To him, this is his childhood home. This isn't a weird, my parents after I went to college lost their mind and bought a drag strip. No, he grew up here. This is home to him.
Yeah, he understands from the outside it's weird, but he doesn't care.
Yeah. And I also like that this movie shows both extremes of that, because his fiance's family, in her mind, while she knows they're also weird, she also doesn't consider them a broken or dysfunctional family.
Exactly. And so, at this point, Armand, who has been the macho man,
he has been trying so hard,
reveals some of his own flair for dramatics and disliking that his son is marrying a woman.
It's so good.
He is such a pouty little brat in this scene.
He really is. But you can also tell that, this is another way to tell that Val's character is meant to be a fully grown, mature adult person, because he knew that his parents were going to do this. He knew that Armand was going to throw a baby hissy fit, but came slightly prepared.
Yeah, and he also knew that Albert was going to be even more hysterical. And so that's why the secrecy and
why he asked to only talk with Armand first, because maybe Armand could break the ice for him.
And this is the scene where we were going to grab white wine, but didn't, because Armand only drinks red, and so does Albert.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, from this, we actually cut to the fiancé, Barbara.
Oh, Barbara.
Where we learn that her folks are super conservative, and that her father is a senator, as she builds up a web of lies for the rest of the drama that will be built upon.
Oh, you left out the best part. Her father's not just a senator, he's the senator of the party of hella conservative something or other.
I have that later, because that's a little bit more important later on.
Gotcha. But I also like the contrast in settings that we get to see here, because up until this point we've only seen the club and their apartment above it.
Yeah.
And their apartment above it is standard 90 tacky. Like, it's very sitcom feely.
I have a mention of that later on.
Yes, the furniture all feels like it's straight out of, like, the sitcoms that were pretty popular around this time period, with extra art put on top of it.
Yes.
And her family's home is boringly gothic.
It's very old world.
It is old world, but not in, like, it's missing that charm.
Yeah.
That a lot of, especially, like, 90s,
It's missing,
color.
No, not necessarily color. It's like, it feels like something Vampira would live in.
It does.
And I reference that because I just watched Ed Wood last night.
Nice. Yeah, their home lacks the soft pillows and soft couch that Val's home does.
Yeah.
There isn't the super bright colors, and I say super bright in that 90s pastel, but kind of highlighter sort of way, where it's bright, but also muted. Not sure how that happened.
It's very,
a lot of browns.
Art Deco.
It's very Art Deco. All of the floors feel like they're probably stone or very hard floor.
Color-wise, I was thinking Art Deco, because
yes.
that's the Florida old school style, yeah.
I see what you... yes,
yeah.
I completely agree. And all of their furniture is very stiff. And it really reflects the two families really nicely without the characters having to explain their backstory to you.
Yep.
But at the same time, just as Val was comfortable in his weirdly penis-y living room, Barbara seems to be fairly comfortable. I mean, granted, comfortable is a loose word since she seems really nervous to be telling her family that she met a man.
Yeah.
But the family is comfortable in their dark, dingy home.
Well, I will say, comparatively to the French version, lot less gay.
Arguably less gay.
It was toned down for the American audience, I would say that.
It is subtly penis-y.
Yeah.
But it is still very, like, how to describe the art? All of the art is on that, like, questionable Greek scale, where it's a lot of naked men wrestling.
Yes.
It's classy, but also a lot of penis-y.
Wrestling.
It's a lot of wrestling. This was one of our favorite games to play when we went to Italy, was because this is very Italian-style art, where it feels classy, but we played a game when we went into museums where you counted how many penises you could see, and whoever had the most got to have a drink bought for them by the end.
My mom always points out when she listens how different lives we lived, because I grew up around this stuff. Like, I went to the Louvre a handful of times when I was, like, in fifth grade. So, like, by that point, I'd seen all that. I didn't care. Like,
yeah, like, the museums in the 90s that I grew up with, yeah, we had the naked statues, and we had a couple naked paintings, but it was a lot more focused on American or folk paintings, which might have one boob slip somewhere or other, but for the most part, everyone's fairly dressed. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of, like, giant naked people wrestling.
Yeah.
It's limited.
Our backgrounds are quite different. And so, after Barbara starts, building the drama.
Oh, Barbara. She's digging herself a hole really fast.
Yeah.
She is weaving a web of lies.
Yes.
But, like, they're all lies that feel like that, like, intense anxiety when you have to tell your parents something, but you know they're going to disprove, so you try and, like, sugarcoat it, but that sugarcoating's a lie. It's
kind of like when my parents introduce me to people, and they say he's an architect, even though I'm not licensed yet.
Yes, it's a sweet lie. We appreciate the lie, thank you.
Yeah. And so, Starina, done with her performance, we cut back to the apartment, comes up and confronts Armand, And the surprise is given away that he has secretly met his son, and
how dare you meet our child without me?
all drama is gone. Well, he even acknowledges that, like, you always keep your son from me.
Yes.
I like this too because it also establishes Albert's character, that he is aware that he is a step parent.
Yes. And I also like that he feels more like an auntie than a mom.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, really sweet because he plays that role in Val's life really well. And Val feels comfortable with that role, which works really well because he knows that he can have that backup with Armand.
Yes. Yeah. And so we cut to the morning where Albert...
Albert.
We've said the name is actually the name for Starina.
Yes, Albert.
Is getting food in preparation for dinner for their son at a bakery where one of my favorite lines is, "When the schmecken calls." And because I'm also a food nerd, they are not eating schmeckens.
No.
A schmecken is a type of sweet bun from Germany that is more, if you've played Skyrim,
yes.
think that sweet roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very similar.
Yeah, and so quick banter out seems to be the life of the town.
Yes. They are well known and liked in the neighborhood.
Yes. Back at home, Armand and the houseman are having a banter about shit coffee and how he's afraid to put and Agador's accusing him that he's afraid to put him on stage because of his natural Guatemalaness.
Which is, while it's all banter, it all feels like banter that they've told each other before and know isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Armand isn't saying you make shit coffee and expecting tomorrow's coffee to be any better.
No.
He likes the shit coffee, he's just wanting something to bitch about.
Yeah. Because as Albert gets back home, he's like, Turkish coffee.
Which I have no doubt was not prepared correctly at all, and is probably just Turkish beans brewed normally.
Probably. And that's actually kind of a nice nod to what's going to happen later on in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah. And so here, Armand actually breaks the news of Val's marriage to Albert as Val comes in. And so I do want to talk about how quickly we've talked about how diverse this cast is.
Yes.
But I like how quickly they've done this and how the little ways they've shown how diverse they are as a group.
Yes.
Where we do, like we've said, slightly feminine but macho Armand, who is, I would assume, prefers black coffee.
It sure seems like it.
Yeah.
Maybe with some sugar in it if he's feeling like it.
Yes. And because up until this point, we've only seen Albert in costume as Starina, who is, let's be honest, actually Albert, just dressed differently.
Yes. Unlike a lot of drag queens, you very much get the sense that this is an extension of personality as opposed to a full different character.
Yeah. And they are a full cross-dresser, and they feel like our very classically gay character.
Yes. They are much more on the feminine spectrum than Armand is. But they also are very comfortable in their skin and are willing to wear what they would probably think of as French-inspired fashion.
Yes. Side note, I did recently see Nathan Lane in a Criterion Closet pick video, and he was dressed exactly how I would imagine Albert would in old age.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then we have Val, who is definitely the manly man of the group,
yes.
who would drink OJ out of a jug if they allowed him to.
He is a fraternity boy through and through.
Yes. And then we have Agador, who is the more stereotypical gay character of the 90s.
And very... Out of the three of these characters, he feels the most like a Miami caricature. Which isn't necessarily an over-the-top, because I've been to Miami multiple times, and there are definitely people who are exactly this man, but with roller skates on their feet. Yes.
Yeah. But not only that, we've focused a lot on this odd hodgepodge of a family. But the fiance's family, we've already quickly established who they are in one scene.
One scene, and that's all you need to know.
Yep. And speaking of which, we cut to the fiance's family, where we were at Barbara's house, who are wondering about their future in-laws as a phone call comes in with bad news.
Oh dear.
Senator Keeley's co-founder of Coalition of Moral Order.
Yes, that's it. That's the order.
Has been found dead in bed with a underage black sex worker.
Yes. Which, each part of that phrase to them was another level of like, oh my god.
And they do say prostitute in
yes.
the movie. So.
In this movie, that is how the family refers to this person.
It's also the 90s.
It is also the 90s, and also we're trying to paint this family as ignorant to the causes that they are standing against as possible.
Yep. And it's good tension building, because without the parents meeting, we as an audience are really beginning to see the conundrum and the clash, where we're being informed about the clashing ideologies and lifestyles of these two people.
Yes.
But the only people who don't know are the Keeleys, and that's what really builds the comedy of the film.
Yes. I also really like this scene because while it is very funny and very comedic, especially because I would say almost all of the like pointed at humor in this film is pointed at the in-law family. There's not a whole lot of times where we're laughing at the Goldman family.
Yeah.
We're usually laughing at the Keeley family.
And if we are laughing at the Goldman family, we're laughing at the banter between them and the situational arguments.
Exactly. And so this scene gives us a chance to reflect on how Barbara handled the situation earlier, because it felt over the top at the time. And now that we're seeing this scene, we're like, oh, I don't know if she lied enough.
Yeah, exactly. And so from this, we actually cut back to Albert and Armand, where Albert is crying over the photos while Armand is working on music. A little bit annoyed at him.
A little bit annoyed, but at the same time, both of them are feeling the same tension of, like, their baby boys not just going away to college, but now getting married, gonna go start his own family.
And they're dealing with it in their own ways.
Which is very different. One is the sensitive heart who wants to reminisce about the time when he was little, and the other wants to get things done.
Work. Very stereotypically mother-father roles.
Yes.
Yes. And so, after this, which it's a nice breakup between, with the families, because after this, we cut back to the Keeley's estate where news crews are waiting outside, as Barbara, in a manner not unlike Adam from Seven Brides for Seven Brothers,
yes,
attempts to tell her mother that, Val's parents aren't exactly who she said they were, because she did say they were, cultural attachés for the Greek, what's the embassy?
Yes, which, nope.
Nope.
Nope, they are not that. But I also like how in this little scene where she tries to confide in her mother, we get to see that while different, there is the same heart and head ratio in this family as there is in Val's family. It's just skewed in different directions.
Yes, exactly. And so, as she tries to tell her mother, her father arrives.
This man's having a bad week.
In from a back window.
I love it.
Pissed as it all can be, but didn't hear anything about what was happening.
No, his blood pressure was too high.
There's been no news about him.
No.
And at this, the mother suggests that the wedding will be a special way to save their image. And honestly, this is the part where I think making the family a political family, because, again, with adaptations, they always change it to make stuff. And even with the original, was the best choice for this film. I
agree.
Because if it had just been some hyper-conservative family, I think it would have made this movie a drag and uninteresting. Just because they, as politicians, are trying to make a gain out of the wedding. They're part of what drives the tension is that the parents are forcing the tension and and not unbeknownst to them, becoming the antagonists of the movie.
And I also like that they're politicians because if they had just been a standard family that happens to be ultra-conservative, it would have been too easy for the plot to have had that giant hole of, well, why doesn't Barbara just do something else about it.
Yeah.
It's clear that, like, even if that had been, they could have... There's always that logic of, well, Barbara still loves her parents and she wants their approval, but it's a lot harder for the audience to get around that whole if her parents are political people who have always had to try and save face since the beginning of time.
Yeah, and I think it would have pushed it into a little bit of... Because both families are... Even with the Keeleys being... walking around with sticks up their butts.
They do. Very large ones.
They're still a little bit more morally gray because, one, they are politicians.
It's just which morals they choose to gray.
Yeah, and I think that if they had made them purely an antagonistic set of characters, it would have felt preachy, like, different from the others.
It would have. And it also balances the families a little bit better because... While, yes, they are politicians, it's well established that the Goldman family is very well loved in their community. They are known throughout the whole street. They own one of the biggest and best clubs in the town. Like, they are not just nobody. They might not be politicians, but in their own way, they hold the same weight, just in their own community. Yeah,
exactly. And so, now we cut back to the Birdcage, where Albert is rehearsing as Val comes down to tell Armin something important. This is another scene where I absolutely love the dialogue and banter between everyone.
It's so quick and good.
It is so well done. And I actually I really wish I had comment. I bitch about watching the commentary and going through all the special features, but I love it.
Yes.
But this is one of those scenes where I wish I knew how much of this was actually written and how much was Robin Williams and Lane working on it, just because...
It's so fast back and forth.
Yeah.
And it also has the same flow, especially if you're more accustomed to watching the behind the scenes and seeing how Robin Williams did his ad-lib. It has that quick-witted vibe.
Yeah, especially that part where he gets up and starts imitating the dances.
Yes.
Because this also was, and I was talking to my mom on our way back from the wedding last weekend, but it really made me miss Robin Williams, even though he has a few movies that were huge to me as a kid.
Yes.
But they didn't have, he wasn't the same weight as a lot of people, but he still had that place in our hearts. And this was just, for me, one of those touching scenes where it was just Robin Williams being Robin Williams.
Yes. And this movie hits that point with me quite a lot, which is part of the reason why it's one of my favorite comedies, is because the banter is so quick, so back and forth, but none of it is mean-spirited or rude just for the sake of being rude. Yeah, they're being a little snarky and sarcastic with each other, but it's given off as the vibe of, this is just how these people talk to each other.
Yeah.
And as a snarky Midwestern person, I understand that and appreciate it.
Exactly. So, now Val breaks the news to Armin that Barbara's family, or pulls him away from the stage, too.
Yes.
And offers him wine.
Are you ready to handle this?
Informs him that Barbara's family is politically conservative, and that Barbara has put the family in a little bit of a pickle with her lies.
Yes. I also love, though, that neither of them did the right thing. Barbara lied to her parents about Val's family. Val just didn't bother to tell his family that his future wife's family will hate their guts.
Yeah. And for me, this is one part of the movie that I'm not a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Well, specifically this one part where the whole I'm marrying her, I'm not marrying the family.
Yeah.
Is worn out, and we know it's not true.
Yes, but I will give it a little bit of backing that this was the 90s.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, there was a bit of this, movement to, if you had to, mindset of, if we have to, we'll just run off together.
And their young star-crossed love. I just realized this movie is basically Romeo and Juliet.
But from the parents' point
of
view. Yeah. It's Romeo and Juliet, but from the parents' side of things, and with more drag queens.
Yeah.
Not a lot more, but a few more.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he's a star-crossed lover. And I also think that Val is comfortable saying that because he knows that no matter how harsh Armand or Albert seem to take something, he can always come back to them.
Yeah.
Even if he marries this girl, even if her family throws her out, to him, he's got that safety net. Because he knows that even if they bitch about it, even if they whine about it, they love him.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit different, I think, for Barbara. I think that's why we don't see Barbara throwing that weight around, is because she loves her parents and definitely wants them to be part of her life, but also knows that, like, if this doesn't work, they will not hesitate.
Yeah, they'll disown her.
They will throw her out to the curb and then mourn her death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also do get to see some little bits of femininity in Armand, because Val mentions that he doesn't want his father to be himself when he meets the parents, and that Albert has to be sent away, but in the doing so, he's like, "You're wearing foundation."
Yes.
And wipes it on the wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is the part where it's a little bit more solidified, because at this point we've seen all of the quirks of Armand, but at the same time, at no point does Armand come off as a girly gay man.
Yeah.
He just comes off as unapologetically himself, and if he wants to wear foundation because he sits in a stage all day, gosh darn it, he's gonna wear foundation. And if he's gonna be the same shade as Albert, he's gonna borrow Albert's foundation.
Yep. And also at this point, we have really our first, even though they don't see each other, the first interaction between protagonists and antagonists.
Yes.
And we kind of have a weird transition from Val being kind of an instigator and almost an antagonist in his own right.
Yes.
And it's an interesting transition, just because, like, he's a good guy and he has heart where he's coming from.
Yes.
But he's approaching things all wrong.
He's a young in love guy who wants things to go the way he thinks they need to win. Exactly.
And so Armand storms off because Albert is trying to steal gum from the previous from one of the actors in the previous scene, which was tension there.
Yes.
And now we have tension in the family itself.
Yes, we do.
And we cut now to the Keeleys again, where the senator is trying to sneak away, but the press is waiting.
I love this scene. He got.
And one thing I do know about the scene is Gene Hackman giving the peace sign was a reference to Nixon.
I knew it.
Because Hackman was on Nixon's list of enemies back in the 70s. And, I mean, it's a nice little scene to show that, like, he's our typical politician. He's trying to find the back door and not deal with shit.
It's not his fault. It's not his problem. Please don't talk to me.
Yeah, at the same time, one of the news crews is paying off the driver. The driver.
Yeah. This driver is done with this shit and would happily take $100. Thank you.
Yeah. Gotta pay that man more.
You gotta pay him more.
And so we cut back to the Birdcage, where Armand is contemplating at the bar and decides to redo the apartment for his son.
Yes.
One thing, as I mentioned earlier, I don't feel this apartment is over the top. Yeah, there's a couple things in there, but it's not the ass face from...
No, the other one is...
the French movie.
The French variation is very much lower half of the mill everywhere.
Yeah.
The whole apartment is just... dicks.
Penises everywhere.
Penises everywhere.
And this is where I wrote down what I felt the apartment feels like. It felt like a little bit like the Golden Girls with a handful of penises. I would argue that the Golden Girls already has a handful of penises. They're just a little bit more subtle than this film. No, what this film reminds me of is there's kind of two genres of 90s sitcoms. There's the ones with the feminine touch family ones, and then there are the ones that are more dude-centric. So, Roseanne versus Married with Children.
Yes. And this...
although I think Married with Children's from the 80s.
Yeah, similar vibe, though.
Yeah.
Similar vibe.
Yeah.
And the set for their apartment feels like it's had that ladies touch. There's throw pillows on everything. Everything has a little rug thing on it. There are doilies under all of the bowls and plates. There are decorations that do not need to be here, but they are because they are pretty and bring me joy. And a standard dude layout would not have looked like this. I would argue it'd look a little bit more like the Kelsey's house, because I think he decorated that house and that she didn't have a whole lot of say in it.
Oh, the Keeleys.
The Keeleys, sorry.
The Kelseys.
Sorry. Dyslexia threw an S in there for me.
Yeah, you're right, because, the Keeleys very much are that typical whatever father says is right.
Yes, and father found this antique furniture and wants it, and so that's what the whole theme of the house is now.
Yeah.
Whereas this one feels much more like Albert has decorated and Armand has put his art in it and the decorator around the art.
Yeah, no, that's quite accurate. And so, Armand is not happy, but he loves his kid. He just says, "Don't talk to me for a bit." Which... Great acting at this part.
It's so good. It's so believable. It's almost hard to remember that Val is not Robin Williams' son.
Yeah, it is Armand's way of saying, I'm a little bit disappointed in you.
And I think this is also the scene where you can tell that he's disappointed, but you also get the vibe that he's not disappointed that he's asked them to tone the apartment down.
No.
He's disappointed that he would request Albert not be there.
Exactly. And so we now cut again to the Keeleys in the car on the way up as the senator is checking the news to see if there's any news about him. Always self-centered.
Always self-centered, gotta check.
Which is another way to balance the families, because the Goldmans are giving everything for their son.
Yeah, they don't give a hoot.
And Senator Keeley is only focused about himself, and so is his wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And at the same time, you get the sense that even though the Goldman family doesn't feel super great about this marriage, you kind of get the sense that, like, at best, they would like them to date a little longer sort of vibe.
Yeah, because in the first conversation, I think they say you're only 16, but she's actually 19.
Yes. Whereas the Barbara's family very much feels like not just in denial, but, like, almost oblivious to, like, her desire to get married.
Which is a weird window, because you have about 10 years between you're too young to be married,
yes,
or why the hell don't I have grandkids yet?
There is a fine line, and depending on whose family you're in, that line is weirdly short.
Yeah.
And I think Barbara is tiptoeing around that line, and that's unfortunate that she has to play that game.
Yeah. I think we're just getting to I would like grandkids at some point, but right now it's just, at least let's get one of you guys married.
Yes. I think Barbara is at that stage where if she had finished college and then spent an entire year in the workforce, by the end of that next year, her parents would be like, well, why aren't you married? Yeah,
because Val at this point is graduating, and he has a job on the way. He's working for a law firm, and...
It's a good job, too.
Yeah.
Law.
And very traditional job.
Very traditional job. In the 90s, everyone thought it made you lots of money, so let's go.
Yeah.
And so, I think Barbara doesn't... Like, in Barbara's mind, at first, this was, like, the perfect setup. Like, that's why I went to college. That's what most conservative girls do. You go to college, you get your standard degree, you might work for a few years, but you're there to meet people, to mingle.
Yeah. You'll settle down. This is the future of the old barn dances.
Yes. But Barbara ended up having to meet Val, and now gets to meet Val's family.
Yes. Yeah. And so, back on the beach.
I love it.
Armand tries to get Albert to leave, while Val and the staff and performers of the Birdcage are rearranging the apartment.
I love that the performers, like the other queens, haven't been left out of this. Because we started this whole thing with the We Are Family song. And I think it, like, in the back of my mind solidified that, like, the stagehands, the queens, everyone who works at this theater probably get dinner together regularly.
Yeah.
Like, they have a key to the apartment and let themselves in whenever they need something.
Yeah.
Like, they are all probably just as equally invested in Val's happiness.
Yeah. And I mean, well, not necessarily Val's, but Armand's.
Definitely Armand's, but you get the sense that, like, they've watched Val grow up. He probably was in the back of the stage when they were rehearsing. He's been sitting in the audience coloring since he was a little boy.
We are family.
Yes. And so I like that they continuously throughout the movie sprinkle them in without making them a big deal.
Yeah. And also one thing I really like about this scene is that it balances the comedy where we've been kind of poking fun at the Keeleys pretty hard up until this point.
It's been pretty brutal.
And their fact that they probably, it's never fully said, but it's probably that they don't really know a lot about the gay community. Probably what they know is from other propaganda of the time.
For sure.
But it's also at this point poking fun at the group of the group of queens as they are out of touch with heterosexual and conservative norms as they put Playboy in the bathroom.
Yes, they do.
And try and hang a moose head.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so funny.
Yeah. And
it's also making fun of this like stereotypically standard straight like narrative. Like, what does that even look like? Isn't that so stupid? Why is there a moose head in your living room? You don't hunt.
My parents have a buffalo head in their house. I don't think it's hanging anymore, but it hung for a few years. Definitely my dad's choice, not my mom's.
Yes, exactly. And so, like, I love that they bother in this movie to make fun of both families kind of equally, because they're so out of touch with people outside of their own community that, like, to them, they are having a hard time of thinking of, like, well, what does a straight man's home look like? Yeah. And so they've decided, well, I've heard straight guys like Playboy. We'll put that in the bathroom.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
It's very funny.
Yeah. And so since Armin sucks at lying.
Yes, he does.
Albert finds out that they are being left out. And as they come into the house, everything's being moved and rearranged. Which is
a bit much for Albert.
They are rightly hurt. Yeah,
no, very much so. And I think this is a really nicely timed scene, too. Because if Albert had come in either before all of the stuff had moved or even after it all had moved, I don't think the audience would have felt the hurt the same way. Yeah. Because you know that Albert spent time decorating this place. And we just watched how emotional and attached he is to all the memories of Val as a kid, who grew up in this apartment, and now you're changing all of it? Yeah. No.
And you're doing it under their nose.
Yeah, couldn't have even asked for their ideas.
Yeah. And now the tension has been... The main conflict has been brought. Yes. And so, or the side conflict between these two. So, Armin goes to confront Albert, who is, at this point, honestly being overly dramatic. Yeah, a little bit. Which ultimately causes Armin to cave, and they go to a cafe to brainstorm how they can keep him and hide his gayness.
Which, they show up at this cafe, are already recognized, given their normal order of coffee with sugar, I think toast. Yeah. Like, it's not like they went somewhere to brainstorm at a Starbucks. They went to their friend's cafe.
Yeah. And it's adorable.
It's so cute.
I enjoy watching the banter of two gay men trying to be straight in the most stereotypical manner, trying to be gay John Wayne.
Yes, and I love that, like, John Wayne was who they picked. As they're like, well, this is who we should emulate. The straightest of men, John Wayne.
To be fair... For a long time, he was the picture of masculinity.
I would argue there's still a lot of people who consider him the picture of masculinity. However, John Wayne walking through Miami, Florida would look really dumb.
Yes, I agree with that. I was just thinking the other person who would actually fit in Miami would be Sean Connery as Bond.
Yes, I think if they had, like, tried to pretend to be Sean Connery, just Sean Connery in general. Yeah. I think it might have gone better, but instead they chose to emulate a cowboy who has spent most of his life on a horse and walks like he's got a full diaper.
Yes. Although, I am sure at some point they've seen assless chaps.
I'm sure. Oh, I have no doubt. They've probably seen more of those than normal chaps. but it does crack me up because it's all about context. John Wayne is the manliest man in the West. Yeah. He would look very silly in Miami, Florida. And that's kind of what they prove with this scene, is that, like, there is no one way to be a manly man. Like,
yeah.
they look just as silly trying to be someone that they're not.
Exactly. And so, in the process, Armand gets his ass kicked.
Yes, he does.
And he breaks the news to Val that Albert is staying.
Albert is staying.
They can't get rid of him. And so, to try and pass, because they're going to say, oh, he's the uncle.
Yes, which, you know,
And,
sure.
yeah, I mean...
Uncle, why not?
Yeah, sometimes family's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is important. He's invested in his nephew's life.
Yeah. And so, they come up, Armin and Val come up with the idea to call, Val's biological mother to do this, since she hasn't had contact in over 20 years, and
yes,
she at least owes him this.
I do like, though, that for someone who hasn't contacted her son in 20 years, they still know how to get a hold of her in the 90s.
There's reason, though.
There is.
There is.
It makes more sense later on, but at the same time...
You are right on that, because that is...
In the 90s, finding someone took a long time.
90s and before social media age.
Yes.
Because I have lost contact with so many people.
Yep.
Like, that I've met just because you move states and never hear from them again.
And it was kind of just how it was.
You
didn't LinkedIn with people. You didn't Facebook stalk people. You hoped that they were in the yellow pages, or that your phone number that you had was the most recent one. Yeah,
that's something that I didn't pick up on, and like it's one of those weird relics of the era that is missable.
And it gives this subtle hint that even though she hasn't been part of Val's life, you get the hint that probably Albert has been trying to give her updates about what's, like, the milestones, most likely. Like, they probably had her number for when he graduated high school and tried to get her to come. They probably sent her photos of Christmas cards and things like that. Like, Albert very much strikes me as the kind of person who would think to himself, well, if I had a kid, I would want to be part of their life, so you must want to be part of your kid's life. Yeah. And sends Christmas cards, even though I'm sure Armand has told him no every year.
Oh, yeah. And so, Albert and Armand now go to the office, where things start going a little bit too well.
Yes.
Side note, the lobby, is the exact opposite of their place. There is a lot of pictures of side boob and asses, because, this is I guess a type of fitness magazine HQ.
Sure.
Which explains why they're able to get a hold of her so easily, because she hasn't probably changed offices in a decade.
No, she's big name now.
Yeah. And we learned that, Armand and Catherine's affair was Armand testing out what all these straight guys are raving about.
Yes. It was a one-night stand that ended in Val.
He tested straightness.
He tested it out.
Yes. And, after this, because honestly, their banter's fine, but it's nothing special. No, it's just them reminiscing about the past.
Yes.
And, it's also a lot less sexually charged than the French one.
The French one is very charged.
Yeah, because in the French one, it heavily implies that Armand is actually bisexual.
Yes.
And that, or Armand's equivalent. And that Albert actually comes in, barges into the office with them almost about to get it on.
Yes.
This one, they're just chilling.
It also implies, too, in the French one, that Val's mother is much more of a troublemaker. Mm-hmm. Like, because she starts this shit. Yeah. In the French one. Whereas in this version, which I like a lot, she's still a little bit of a shit starter. Like, she still likes a little drama. She'll stir the pot gently, but she's not diving headfirst to ruin someone's relationship.
No, because she's a career woman. She's got shit to do.
And I also think that this is a woman who has come to peace with who she is, just like Albert and Armand have come to peace with who they are in their adult lives. And so she doesn't feel the need to stir the pot. She has a good thing going. She's happy.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, it's trying to portray their family as almost the perfect family.
Yes.
The Brady Bunch.
It is a little Brady Bunchy.
The Brady Bunch of gayness.
The Brady Bunch of yeah. It's Brady Bunchy without that, like, underlying hint that one of those children is being left at the airport.
Yes, exactly. And so, being over dramatic as always,
Of course.
Albert completely misreads the room and over dramatically leaves.
Can you blame the man? He's had a hard day.
I mean,
He did.
yeah.
I mean, he just barely got to come to his own son's introduction to the fiancé.
Yeah,
so,
he-
tensions are already strung.
Yeah, he's afraid he's going to be replaced.
And we've also learned from the beginning of the film that this is a long fear of Albert, that he's going to be replaced, that Armand secretly loves someone else, that he's not good enough for Armand. And oh my god, it's all coming together.
Yep. And after this art, we cut to the apartment where Armand has returned to tell Val that Catherine has agreed, as Albert also returns. And I actually like this little overdramatic part because it's a nice building moment where Albert admits that he looks odd and that he knows he's often over the top.
Yes.
While being over the top.
While still continuing to be over the top. Yes.
Yeah.
I like that they bother to pinpoint Albert's insecurity, because it makes Albert much less of just a drama queen to be drama-ing, but more of someone with a strong insecurity that they know is valid and that other people are judging them for.
Yeah.
But that is who they are.
Yeah. I mean, it's like me walking around with my one green hat that's got the Baphomet pentagram on
Yes.
it. Yeah. I look ridiculous, but I like the hat.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so after he storms out, giving all his wigs to oh shit, what's his name? Agador.
Agador, which is saying something, because those are expensive.
Yes, and it's not just first Agador's like, what wigs? All of them.
All of them.
And so Armin goes to make up with Albert by giving him a palimony agreement.
Yeah.
Because, and that's actually one thing I do really like about this, is that Armin was planning to give it regardless.
Yes.
But Albert was being stubborn
Yes.
and not listening. He's like, I don't have it on me, but can I give it to you tomorrow? And it technically is tomorrow.
It is technically tomorrow.
Which, also, what a trip to make for a dinner party.
Yes.
This movie takes place technically in 3 days, this
is
two,
a car ride and a half.
it's 2 days when the main movie takes
Yes.
place, and then there's a skip at the end. But whatever. But yeah, a long time.
Yes. It's a long time frame for, especially a comedy film.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's
It's
interesting.
paced really nicely.
It is. It is very well done. And so, Armin says, screw it all. Albert has to be there. There's no way around it.
No.
And I also love this moment because it shows that Armin, despite him being a relative dickhead at times,
He can be stubborn.
he really does love Albert.
He really does.
And he's even given up his fancy grave plot.
Yes. I love this interaction the most in this entire film. And arguably this is one of my favorite scenes ever from Robin Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Not because the acting is the best that he's ever done or that the comedy is so perfect, but because the way that he manages to portray his emotions to someone who is so hurt, but also someone who thinks in drama by doing something dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
I love my plot. It's so perfect. It's the best one. But I'm gonna give it up because I want to lay next to you so we can laugh forever.
Yeah.
Like, it hits the comedy, like, sad twinge just perfectly so that the rest of this film feels like that perfect release.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it clears up the tension that's going on between Armin and Albert.
Yes.
Because Albert also kind of has a realizing moment that he might not be able to pull it off, too.
Yes.
And so...
I also think this is the moment where Albert fully buries any question on Armand's love for him, or that Armand's trying to do what's best.
Yes. And so, they try to call Catherine to tell her, you don't need to come. Well, we've got it.
But this is the 90s.
Yeah! Answering machines!
If they had been a little bit closer to her, maybe they would have had her pager number. But they don't.
But there's also car phones, which we forget that were a thing.
They were, but car phones worked sometimes.
And you could only call out. You couldn't call to.
You couldn't call to, so in true 90s fashion, they can't get a hold of her.
Yes. And so now we cut back to the in-laws who say they are driving to their salvation.
They are still so set that this wedding is for them.
Which is a nice little deviation and quick cut because it adds just a little bit more tension since we haven't seen the in-laws in a good hour or so.
That's right. They've been stuck in a car going through a really boring car trip.
Yeah.
A tense, boring car trip.
Oh,
this has got to wind Barbara up so bad. Because this is also the 90s, which means she can't, watch stuff on her phone or play games. She just has to sit in awkward silence with her upset parents.
If she had a Game Boy, which her
parents...
Do
you think her parents would give this
one... No, exactly.
Barbara, at best, is allowed to read the Bible the way down. A dry read. Maybe if she got real spicy, she could go to one of the fun books, but, I have a bet that she was taught to sit quietly and twiddle her thumbs.
Yeah.
For however many hours. 8 hours.
Oh god, who knows at this point.
Such a long drive.
Yeah, because now Armin back at home breaks it to Val that they're getting ready.
This is happening.
It's happening. And there's still a little tension and aggression between the two.
It's all nervous at this point, I think.
Yeah, they're both on edge.
Yeah.
And as they're getting ready and they're all dressed up, Albert tries his best as he comes in a suit and tie, but he's not convincing enough.
No, and I think the main problem with Albert in a suit and tie isn't necessarily that Albert doesn't look wonderful, because he looks very good in a suit and tie, but he doesn't look like Albert.
No.
It feels too much like Albert trying to put on a stage play.
He feels like a thumb in a suit.
He feels like a thumb in a suit. And so he goes to get changed.
Yeah. Oh, sadly.
Yeah.
And, because at this point, they still haven't reached Catherine, so they're hoping she doesn't come. Val takes, the stress a little out on his maid, Poor
Agador.
Yeah, because Agador is trying to do his best. I am Agador Spartacus.
But also, as we might have mentioned earlier, Agador can't wear shoes.
Yes.
He never really learned how, and they make him trip.
Mm-hmm.
So, while they did gussy him up into real clothing, not just some stringy underwear, he's still himself. Boy, it's really hard to hide who you are.
It's still Agador Spartacus.
Even if he is trying his best.
Yes. And, so, at this, Catherine calls, and, Val tells her, yes, please come.
Yeah, because in Val's mind, that's the only saving grace. Is if we have a woman in the house, and she's a professional business lady, surely she can politic them. Yeah.
And also, it's behind, Armand's back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, unlike Armand and Albert, Val hasn't had that closure yet.
Yes.
Val's still convinced that this is the only way to make it work.
Yes. And so, outside the in-laws arrive. They arrive to tits and ass and banana hammocks galore.
Because it's Club Street. They get out on the club side.
It's the 90s, hookup culture. Everyone's trying to get some.
And also, they play up the whole Miami, Florida vibe for this scene, which I like a lot, because it's not spring break level crazy, but it is Friday night level crazy.
Yeah.
They showed up on a weekend.
Yeah. And so, the last bomb is dropped that their name is, right as the in-laws are coming in, that their name is Coleman, as Barbara told them that that's what it was, and she didn't inform them that they are Jewish.
Surprise.
Honestly, I get where Barbara's coming from, and she's trying to make her parents happy and accepting, but she's the worst.
She is the worst, but I also like that they let Barbara be the worst, because, especially having grown up with friends, not as bad as Barbara's parents, mind you, but with really strict parents, that's one thing that a lot of my friends who grew up that way learned really quickly, was how to lie, and you just keep going until it's fine.
until it's too late for them to do anything.
Yes.
It's, as we say as we said in school,
Yes.
it is better to do something and then ask forgiveness later.
Yes, than to have never done anything at all.
I'm sorry, Professor, I don't have this render, but I have these 20 cool section drawings for you.
Don't you like sections? And the answer is always yes.
Mine was always, I don't have models, but here's a bunch of concept process work.
Yep. Yep. And so I like that they let Barbara continue to lie, not necessarily because it adds to the plot or continues on jokes, which it does, but it makes Barbara feel real to me. Because I think if Barbara had tried to, like, even at this point, been like, yeah, their name's Goldman, how isn't that weird? The fact that she continues to lie, to me, makes her exactly who I think she's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And since we don't get a whole lot of time with Barbara, we have to run on assumptions with her.
Yeah, exactly. And so now the in-laws arrive.
We are here.
And shit is awkward.
It is real weird.
Catherine, and while they're getting ready, Catherine calls and she tells them she is stuck on a bridge, to which Armand realizes she hasn't gotten the message, and shit's gonna get even worse.
Oh no.
And this is, this whole, conversation is quite painful. It's,
oh, it's so stiff.
Yeah, it's painfully boring, and I'm glad they also don't make it short.
No, it is the perfect amount of too long awkward, where it proves that everyone knows how to be nice and polite, but boy, nice and polite is really awkward and boring.
It must be how, friends and family have viewed me when, I gush on about movies, architecture, or serial killers sometimes, because,
Yes.
I do know I go a little bit too far. And so, after a bit of this banter, Catherine calls again to say start dinner without her.
Yes.
But she will be there soon. As Armin leaves to check on dinner and tries to convince Val that this is going to work because, guess who has arrived to dinner?
His mom's here.
Yeah. Albert, dressed in a very obvious drag.
Yes, but I like this style for Albert's impression of Val's mom, because this was one of the things that the French film, some critics I feel like were like, oh, the French one did Albert's mother look better. I disagree, because Albert is not a cross-dresser. He is a flamboyant man who might wear like a more feminine piece.
Yeah.
But he is a drag queen. And there's a difference.
No, he is also a cross-dresser. The whole movie he's been wearing heels and...
He is just a flamboyant man wearing heels. At no point does Albert attempt to be a lady. He's always wearing something that's he wears it femininely, but it's an Italian style. I would argue that he is a drag queen first, and the reason I argue this is because when he comes out, it is still drag makeup. It is over the top. He did his best not to use all the glitter in his drawer, but there's still glitter.
Yeah.
Like, it is not the subtle, I am a woman sort of look. He's done what he knows, which is drag makeup, which is meant for a stage. It is meant for comedy and for theatrics.
Yeah.
And he's done his very best to tone it down, and it is still drag makeup because that's what he knows.
Okay, I'll take your word for it because I don't know a whole lot about drag. So,
Fair.
But for me viewing it, he still looks like a cross-dresser to me.
Yes.
So because it's not, because from what I know from drag is an over-exaggeration of femininity.
Sure.
Where I've seen women in the exact same outfits, same body style, toadish looking, dress like that.
No, and there is always the play on where does one line start and the other begin, and Dolly Parton is a really great example of where does that line blur. Yeah. And that's, part of the reason why she is loved as much as she is because she unapologetically toes that line. But Albert's interpretation in this film is much more costumey than the
Mhm.
French one, which I like a lot because the French one feels so much more subtle. It's almost believable makeup.
Yeah.
The wig is very tame and believable, and it is very prim and proper. Whereas while Albert did his very best to look like a proper lady, it is still Albert's tastes.
Well, I like what you bring up and the fact that it looks like he's wearing a costume because the outfit reminds me of Jackie Kennedy's.
Yes.
Classic pink outfit.
Which I think is exactly what Albert was also thinking when putting this piece together.
Yeah.
Was because the Kennedys would have been kind of an ideal, especially Jackie Kennedy.
Yeah.
She was very much looked at as someone with a smart fashion sense for the conservative lady.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, Albert knows what she looks like. I'm sure there's been plenty of drag queens who do an interpretation or an impression of her.
Yeah.
And so he's done his best, but it is still Albert underneath all of that makeup, and it is still his drag queen hand putting on that glitter.
Yeah, which is great because like he really does save the life of the party.
He really does. And he brings it together in a way that like they all knew they needed.
Yeah.
They all needed that strong female lead who's good at parties and a great host and always has something to say
Mhm.
and can banter with even the hardest customer, who happens to be poor Barbara's father.
Yes. And while this is all going on, real quick, William's falling in the kitchen.
Oh, poor William. The shoes. I love it. It's as close to slapstick as this movie gets, and
Well,
it's perfect.
That's because it wasn't planned. He actually fell and they just kept it.
Yes.
And so I guess you can see the two other actors like trying to hold back their laughter at that scene.
But this we've talked about it before, but our dear maids / now butlers entire character is that perfect balance between everyone.
Mhm.
And so his slapstick style humor at this scene really balances out the stiff humor that's going on in the living room or in the dining room at this point.
Yeah. And so there's a little bit more building on this too, because we do cut to the outside where the news is aware that the senator's in the area, but they can't piece everything together just yet. All the while, Armand is high-strung
Very.
as Albert is being the life of the party, and the father-in-law brings up the Jackson case and that he understands why everyone's on edge. All the while, Albert does what I do in uncomfortable situations and makes it worse.
He does make it worse.
By bringing up conspiracy theories.
He does, but at the same time, Albert has pinpointed a weird niche with the senator where he's continuing the senator's conversation with him, like a good host would, but at the same time stopping any bullshit that he feels like is being brought up or bringing down anything, but at no point is he letting that that caricature that he's painted for this family break.
Yeah.
He's being the perfect host.
Yeah, that's right, because when he shows up, he just brings all this extra bullshit into the family.
And you can also see in the background that Barbara's mother is kind of really starting to like Albert. Like, she doesn't get to say a whole lot because, of course, her husband has taken over the conversation.
No, she doesn't like Albert because her husband's so transfixed on this other woman.
But it cracks me up because you can tell that the senator has no idea. This man is blind as a bat. Nothing is foul-footed in this place. This is a perfectly normal apartment home.
Oh, yeah. We forgot to talk about the redecorating.
Yes. Oh,
they've turned it into a monk sanctuary.
It looks so dumb, and I love it. Because, especially as architects, there are a lot of pieces that we see that get reused in, like, cliche, stupid ways. And everything they put in this apartment fits the narrative of, like, the weird Greco-Roman / sad Gothic monk vibe.
The chairs feel like they'd be out of my parents' house.
They're so stiff and tall.
Yeah.
Like, they're beautiful pieces. They're very artsy. They still fit in with that artsy vibe, but they're so
stiff.
They are not what Armand is used to, and you can tell.
No. One thing I do have to say is not an Ames chair in sight. I don't think there's even a Corbusier chair.
No.
Thank you.
There isn't. If you're a furniture person and you want to be really picky, I do think the stripy couch in the living room makes several appearances in other TV shows.
Yeah.
But that's just because, couch patterns in the 90s were limited.
Yeah.
And you kind of had only 3 options: beige, stripedy, or flower.
Plaid.
And the plaid, 4 options.
We had plaid.
Was your plaid itchy as hell too?
No.
A little bit too raised to be fully comfortable.
No, mine was nice.
Nice?
Ours was like mid-late 90s plaid.
They had learned how to lower that. I had the one where if you fell asleep on it, you had the pattern stuck on your face.
One of those.
One of those.
And so now we cut back outside where the National Enquirer has pieced everything together that the Colemans are actually the Goldmans, and the senators should be there at their house, and they're the owner of the drag club above. Or below.
Yes.
Yes.
I do like that this kind of solidifies how dense the senator is. The Colemans live directly above the club, which is well known to be run by the Goldmans. In fact, I think they even mention that they have some knowledge of who the Goldmans are, but they've never seen them. They don't know who they are, really. They've just heard the name.
Or it's something on their doorway that says Goldman or something. Yeah.
Like they should have had an inkling at this point. And the only one, other than Barbara, of course, who seems to maybe be catching on is kind of the mother, but she's not really allowed to do a whole lot of the talking or anything at this point. So Senator is just clueless as all get out. Yeah.
And back inside, the cluelessness is still going on as the party is going rather well as we cut to a odd musical bit.
Yeah, there's now song and dance, which I'm sure for the theatrical Albert probably feels right. This is a dinner party. Dancing is part of a dinner party. It's probably a little bit more than I think the senator's family is used to, but they're going along with it because it's kind of like a 1950s thing, and they love the 1950s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, dance party.
Yeah, it's just an odd little bit. And then it kind of serves as like a little transition over to dinner.
Yes.
Because Agador comes out saying that dinner is served, but the bowls he has set out have,
Greek men wrestling.
Wrestling.
This is just some naked men having sex.
Yes.
But it's on their bowls, and so thankfully the soup is thick and they can't see through it once the food's on the plate.
Yeah, because Armin rushes out to grab the soup that Agador is slurping into it, which, what does he call it? He calls it sweet and sour surprise stew or something? Or seafood stew. That's what Armin calls it.
Yes, which it's none of those things.
Yeah, because honestly, we can describe what is happening as, but I don't know. I just can't describe the banter that's happening.
It's so quick. It's so back and forth, and the main gist of it is we get very clear. We understand very clearly that he might normally be a very good cook, but he was asked to create something for this family, and he doesn't know what they want, and so he's put together kind of what they had, plus it's gone real fast, it's not gone to plan, and this is what we have, damn it.
And it's also the only thing he's made, because
there's nothing else, there's no other food.
Armin back bitching at him, Val comes in, and Val reacts the same way, and I think this is actually the scene where he falls.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the scene where he falls. Because while they're in the kitchen, more press is arriving, and so does Catherine.
Yeah, surprise! And of course, they're in the kitchen, so she has the chance to announce herself as Val's mother.
Yeah,
Oops.
Because Albert is having coffee with them in the living room. And, I'm sorry, we got to mix up a little bit. Because they go to have coffee, and then Albert's wig starts falling off.
Yeah, which... It breaks my heart because you can tell that he got ready in a hurry. Because a normal drag queen would have either pinned or glued that shit down, and he didn't have time.
No. And so they all carry him off to fix and glue it back in place as Catherine arrives. A little bit before, because the Keeleys throughout are coming up, Senator Keeley, being oblivious, is coming up with this whole other backstory about the family of how
He's made this whole thing up in his head.
Armand is a snobby European and Albert is some small girl he has bamboozled as he begins to insult every European nation he can.
He's just going through the list, really. That's right. He's insulting them all.
I know, Charlie. I know you've heard me bitch about other countries before.
But this man outdoes even us.
Yes. Perfectly timed. And so this actually leads the in-laws to start fighting.
Yes.
As they try and get their shit together as Catherine arrives.
Mm-hmm.
And everything has been brought to light and falls together. And when the truth comes, once the truth comes out, Senator Keeley is still a dipshit.
He is still an idiot. But at the same time, he is trying hard to hold on to that narrative he wrote in his head.
Yes, he's trying to piece together how Albert can be Mrs. Coleman.
Yes, because he can't, his brain...
Overheating, must go. Which, I mean, I do kind of like the moment where the daughter tries to stand up, and it really shows like how much of a hold the family has over her.
Yes, this has been her whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the part where she says, I really wish I could have been part of your family.
Yeah.
And gives the key ring back as they try to leave as the cameramen are outside.
Surprise! You thought you were leaving? No.
And now the senator's in a pickle because he's
been caught at a compromising location.
And he's still an ass about his election, where everyone's being so nice to him, but he is still a prick.
Yes, and at this point, even Val's mother has, decided to get off her high horse.
Mm-hmm.
She's done with this dog and pony show, she is tired of this shit, and she would just like it all to end. And if that means that her daughter marries this guy and his family, fine.
Yeah. And there's another thing I really like, too, is because the senator's still self-centered.
He is.
And he says people only read headlines, and that is a solid remark.
It is.
But that is another rant for another time.
I mean, he was in the 90s, so I will give him that. Nowadays, he would not get away with it.
No. Not at all. I mean...
There is no headline anymore. Only constant feed.
There are headlines, but they're secretly disguised. You won't believe picture 10 when ... It's still there. It is. It's turned into clickbait instead. And so now the plan has been brought up to get them out through the front as in drag. As we return to basically the beginning of the movie as they're sneaking out as they sing "We Are Family."
Yes. And you can tell where we've reached a point where everyone who is comfortable with themselves has gone back to being themselves. Armand is back in business mode. Albert is back to being Albert and Auntie Albert and fixing this problem last minute like he's good at.
Yep.
And unfortunately the senator is not comfortable at all, and I don't feel bad.
I don't either. It's a funny moment.
It is.
Barbara looks very,
Barbara looks like she could end up having fun with the evening.
Yeah, what's that, kind of makes me think of the Bengals, Dance Like an Egyptian.
Yes.
She looks like she'd be from that kind of video.
Yes, everybody who's part of the party has been got up into a completely different look, so that way hopefully they can just blend into the crowd.
Yes, and as they flee, I love the part where the senators meet me by this street, in your dreams. And so the credits begin, they get out, the credits begin to roll as we cut to the Goldman and Keeley wedding.
Yes, it's so cute.
It is happy because Albert is, as always, being over dramatic,
yes,
over the top crying, while the Keeley side is looking over like, what the hell are we looking at?
Yep. And
I can't tell which one's the wife or which one's the mother.
I believe it is the crying one. Yes, and I like that they bothered to wrap it up with the wedding, because they didn't have to. They could have ended with just everyone escaping and going about their way. But the fact that we don't get anything else, we just get a wedding, leaves it for the imagination to know how long this engagement took, how much drama there has been, and how long Albert has had time to save up these tears.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it for happy endings, I enjoy it.
I do too. I think it's a really good comedy happy ending.
Yeah.
Because a lot of comedy endings leave you on that one weird joke.
Yeah.
And this one, while it does leave you on a funny note, I wouldn't say it necessarily ends on the joke.
Yeah, and also the thing it ends on, it's not the stereotypical romance movie of them, will they get them, will they not, last montage, parallel action. Just like, nope, the families are letting them get married. They don't give a shit anymore, really. Yeah,
and because we've seen the rest of this movie, because we have well established who all of our characters are, we kind of don't need any more than that. We can put it together ourselves in our heads what the future looks like, what that engagement looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's a nice...
It's a nice, tidy ending.
Nice, tidy, and wholesome ending.
It is very wholesome.
Yeah. And so, that's the Birdcage.
That is. It's the whole movie.
I mean, on its release, it was actually a major success.
Yeah.
And it mostly received positive reviews when it was first released, and everyone I know of has enjoyed it. Like,
yes, I don't know anybody I don't know anybody who doesn't love it. Yeah. I know several people who have forgotten that they've seen it. And once you're like, hey, I'm doing this one this week, do you want to watch it with me? It's a flood of, I love that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a fun movie. And also, side little bit, it was the highest, or it had the highest weekend opening grossing with openly gay characters until Bruno in 2009.
That's a long time.
Yeah, which Bruno's something else. But
yes.
We'll go into we can do that another time.
Not on the same level.
No. And the film was actually praised by the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Allegiance Against Defamation, or GLAAD.
Yes.
The opposite of the conservative blah 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 party.
Yes, they have a cool acronym, unlike the conservative party group in the movie.
And outside of the movie, for the most part, it seems like it's gone by the wayside, unfortunately. I mean, Hank Azaria has done a couple episodes of The Simpsons in '99 as Agador.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we've said, this I don't know why this movie's kind of gone by the wayside either. Yeah.
The thing that I don't understand is why it hasn't become more of a staple comedy watch.
Yeah.
Because everyone I know who has seen it love it and are upset that they don't watch it more often.
Yeah, well, and I mean, for such, especially for the 90s, such a positive outlook towards the gay community.
Yeah. I mean,
even my resident gay correspondent didn't know this movie.
Yeah.
To be fair, we do end up picking the odd movies out, but it's still one of those ones that stuck with you long enough.
It's stuck with me since I watched it the first time.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why it hasn't stayed in people's mindset is good or bad because of Robin Williams. His name brings people to movies, but he has so many other roles that got so much more attention, stuck with people's minds so much harder, and for a lot of families, he has roles that they consider like the Robin Williams classic.
Well, and I think you're onto something there, because this is offbeat comedy from what he's previously done. We've like Mrs. Doubtfire is in a similar vein, but it's still more Robin Williams. And I think part of it is because he plays definitely a more serious character in this role. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people were ready for that, because I've talked to my mom about Robin Williams. I think it's 5 Hour Photo.
Yes, I love that. You would love that.
I've been told I would love it. My parents hate it.
A lot of people hated it because he was serious.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is he was kind of typecast, because I mean, then we have Good Will Hunting and also Dead Poet Society, but
I mean, it got to a point where it was Robin Williams in films, and less of Robin Williams as the actor playing a character, which is why this is my favorite Robin Williams film. It feels like a proper character. Armand feels like a whole person, not Robin Williams as a person.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people, that's not who Robin Williams is. That's not what they expect going into a Robin Williams film.
Yeah, and I can see that too. I mean, also, like, Nathan Lane, great in this movie too.
Fantastic.
Like, we've talked about how great they are.
They did.
In both roles.
Yeah, and their play off of each other throughout the whole movie was spotless. But I don't know if I would qualify this movie as, like, the top Nathan Lane film for you to go find.
No, and I mean, even for me, like, with Robin Williams, I love him in the role and I love the movie, but it's not my top Robin Williams movie. And maybe that's why it's gone by the wayside, because most of Robin Williams' other works overshadowed it, so has Nathan Lane with, like, the producers.
Yeah, and whether or not that it helped or hindered, 90s films really hit their stride and stuck with people once they hit home video.
Yeah.
And this movie's home video release was okay, but it wasn't stellar.
Yeah, and we've also talked about that too, like some of the other more recent movies, like Sukiyaki Western Django, where it's still a little bit too early to tell where this will settle. And I
do think that this movie will come back around. I do think, especially now that the DVDs are a lot easier to get a hold of, now that, like, it's being shown more and more at different festivals and community events, and just kind of people are refinding it. I do think eventually this will come back around to be the cult classic it's meant to be. But I think part of the reason, especially for the 90s, home releases help solidify something as a cult classic, because you were able to go find it at a garage sale or a flea market and remember you wanted to see this film.
Yeah.
This movie's not on any pre-roll ads on those VHS tapes from the 90s. It's not on the coming soon part of your DVD. This movie wasn't advertised to the masses after it was released, like a lot of other stuff was, which isn't necessarily a thing anymore because you can find stuff so easily. But back then, that really made a huge impact on whether or not people were going to buy it and rewatch it every year.
Yeah.
And they all watched it the first time, but no one bought it.
Yeah, it makes me think of The Aviator a little bit, where that one, everyone loved it. It was such a great movie. Mm-hmm. DiCaprio did a great job. A lot of people kind of forget it exists.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are movies that are going to be like that.
Yeah.
In the more recent years with the DVD movies, not just the VHS tapes.
Oh, the joys of trying to find some of the more obscure Nicolas Cage movies.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage is a good example of actor who his other works outshined a lot of his other ones, so there just isn't the supply there. Because this one, I think people are going to start coming back around, it's definitely come back into a lot of talks that I've seen online. Yeah. It's definitely started to show back up at more film festivals and, summer movies at the park sort of thing. I hope it comes back around because I love this movie. Yeah,
it's great. I mean, I honestly can't recommend it enough. I mean, I
watch this movie at least once a year.
Yeah, I honestly, it's probably going to come into my repertoire of, like, hey, we want to watch a comedy? This one's a good one. And that's the other thing is it's, I'm sure it's still hit and miss between people, but, like, it's definitely in more my vein of comedy. Like, I watched a comedy movie. We celebrated Father's Day early because two of us were in town, and we watched this movie called I Feel Pretty.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dad, if you listen to it. I thought the movie was a bit boring and the comedy wasn't there. I know you thought it was funny, but
there's just some comedies, and Robin Williams and this movie specifically are one of the few American style comedies that really do hit lots of people. I would say the majority of people will find this film funny, and that's coming from someone who doesn't find most comedy films funny. And it's not because this is my general, like, quirk of humor. That's not true at all. My quirk is British humor through and through. But this film throws in just enough elements, it's fast-paced enough, and the jokes aren't that cringe-hurting jokes. Like, everything in this movie feels wholesome, but funny at the same time.
Exactly. So, at the end of the day, do you recommend The Birdcage, Chris?
Yes. If you haven't seen it, go now!
I completely agree with that. And if you do want, a French movie is... I would say, honestly, the French one's more accessible.
It is.
But if you can track it down, or if it's streaming on anything, definitely watch this. It is
so good.
Comic gold, well written, tight script, everything has purpose. Like,
all of the jokes land.
Yeah.
It's, to me, the perfect comedy.
Yes. Same here, so. Anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Peace.